Episode number 31, Pat Flood.
All right, cut to edge of stage. Great. All right, color frost.
Check. 1, 2, 3. Check.
Stand by, please. Heads to half, heads out, letting cues 1 through 10, down cues 1 through 10.
And welcome back to The Title Block, a podcast about Canadian theatre designers, their history, and their craft. I'm your sickly host, Michael Cruz, suffering from a bout of laryngitis. Thank you, Blythe friends, for that party over the weekend, but committed to bringing you the best audio in Canadian theatre design. Now, I was in full voice when I had an in-depth and illuminating conversation with designer Pat Flood. Pat met me in May at her office at the University of Guelph, and we chatted about her early training in Alberta and Minnesota, and went on to discuss her career in film and television and working on iconic programs like Kids in the Hall and great Canadian theatre like The Black Bonspiel of Wooly McCrimmon by W.O. Mitchell. Now, make sure to check out the show notes. There was a lot of name dropping, and there are a few portfolio shots from Pat's collection that'll help illustrate our chat. And if you are able, go to patreon.com to support the Title Block podcast. We had another opportunity to record a conversation at the Bellows here in Toronto a few weeks ago, and that show will be up soon. So to continue supporting the collection of Canadian theatre stories, please consider throwing us a couple of bucks an episode. It really helps. I don't get a lot of mail, but if you have any comments about the show, please forward them to thetitleBlock@gmail.com or contact us through Facebook or Twitter, and I would love to hear from you. Now, that's all for my scratchy voice, save for the extra. Can't wait for that. So here's my conversation with Pat Flood.
Pat Flood has a career spanning 40 years as a designer for film and theatre and is currently a tenured professor at the University of Guelph School of English and Theatre Studies, where she joins me today. Pat Flood, welcome to the Title Block.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you.
Great idea to do this.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to speak with you as well, since you kind of started. I met you at the start of my career when I was at Blythe for the first time, so it's great to have this conversation to sort of recap the last 40 years
The last 40 years
of your
of
career.
Oh my gosh.
And what's going on in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you were born in Alberta,
Yes,
correct?
in Calgary.
In Calgary, and you ended up at the University of Alberta.
Yes.
And how did that happen? Did you study theatre there? I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, growing up in Calgary in the 50s and 60s, you would understand, I think. It was, suburban Calgary, circa 1965. What am I going to do with my life? And I was lucky enough, there was a children's theatre that came out of the Allied Arts Centre in downtown Calgary. And of course, I thought I wanted to be an actor because, well, that's theatre, right? You want to be an actor. And also there was a good theatre program at Henry Wisewood High School where I went. And I realized very quickly that maybe I wasn't going to be cast in a lot of things. So, I know, I can do the backgrounds. I can paint, right? I like doing this. And bit by bit, I decided, against my parents' better advice and wishes, that I was going to be a theatre designer. And I don't actually know, someone must have given me that idea. At the time, I thought it was, you just painted sets and made them look nice, and I thought that would be really cool. Yeah. And there was a program at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. It was a 4-year BFA, a very new one, started by a man named Gordon Peacock, who had been, I think, teaching at the National Theatre School, and he really wanted to have a theatre school in Western Canada. And so he got a bunch of people together. He got the university to approve it. It was a good time for all of that. The arts coming into universities. Sort of the academic world was relaxing a little bit about that maybe there might be some content in the arts and maybe we should actually, put this into higher learning. And I was, I was there for 4 years at U of A. I loved it. It was a fabulous program. There was a woman there named Gwen Keatley, who was very much my mentor. She was a graduate of the National Theatre School, originally from Sault Ste. Marie, very talented designer. And she and her husband, Bob Carmichael, who designed the Loonie, by the way, kind of a side fun fact, Robert Ralph Carmichael, who's a painter, they both taught me what it was to be an artist, to think as an artist, as a designer, which it was a real revelation to me. I had no idea, and it was so exciting to learn that I could draw, that I could be a part of the process of creating theater rather than just responding to it. So that was, it was great. It was wonderful.
And was the program, was it a specific design program, or was it it was a design program?
Yeah, it was. You did your first year was kind of general, where you took acting and technical stuff. I don't remember. There was a wonderful course taught by a man named Bernie Engel, which was creating sort of happenings. It was called collages at the time, where you created small theatrical events and played all the different parts in it, but you were the producer and the conceiver, which was a fabulous learning experience. And then you specialized in design. So you learned technical, but you also learned art as well. And what was really unique, I think, about the program at the time is a lot of people learned to be designers by learning how to build sets. Where we learned how to paint and draw and think like artists, and then we learned how to create it. You know, the idea was, if you have the idea, someone can build it. Someone will find a way. But your job as a designer is to have that imagination to kind of lead the process and be a visual director. So,
And did they have the at the time? Obviously, there was the theatre community in Canada had kind of burst out of the 1960s, quite. And flowered, I think, by that point quite well. Was there enough? Were all the staff Canadians, or did they bring people in from outside of Canada to teach? Or was
there was a lot of Canadians. It was interesting. My design teachers, the first one was an American, then Gwen Keatley. They were both there together. And then there was a British designer who came in named David Lovett. So I had three very unique perspectives. The American designer, whose name was, Len Feldman, and then he was replaced by Larry Cadillac. They were very much technicians. They were, you got to get your drafting down, and you got to pass the exams, right? It was all about the big International Scenic Artist exam in the U.S. and that kind of thing, whereas the other people were coming from a very different perspective, which was wonderful because you got both sides of it.
Yeah. And did you go to, who were your classmates? How many people were in the program, first of all? Was it a large program?
No, it wasn't. Yeah. That was the other thing. It was like a little boutique program. We had our own studio. There was a senior design studio and a more junior design studio. I think there was maybe 7 or 8 other design students. Who did I go to school with? Tom Wood, Bob Baker, Rick Roberts, who you might not know, but Rick and Guy and Peter Roberts all have been part of the theatre community for a long time. Their sister Lisa as well. Rick is a film designer in Calgary now, has been for years. Trying to think who else was there at the time. Cheryl Cashman, I don't know if you know Cheryl. It's going to escape me, a lot of the other people, but most of them went into the profession in one way or another.
Yeah. It sounds like I spoke with Alan Stitchbury, and he was a U of A grad as well, after tootling around BC a little bit. So it seems like and from the people you mentioned, quite an important program.
Yeah,
coming
for
out of
its
U of A in
time,
the
it
70s.
was really unique. And, one of many things where I think I was so fortunate, because I just stumbled into it. It's like, I was going to go to Toronto, but I couldn't really figure out the whole U of T thing because there was all these colleges, and I couldn't figure out where the theatre program was and stuff. And then I thought, look, Edmonton. And my mother said, that'll be good. You won't be so far away. You bring your laundry home.
That's right. And speaking of stumbling into things, now after you left the U of A, you ended up in Minneapolis. How did you find your way down there?
Very crazy. Yeah. I was at U of A, and I graduated, and I went to Toronto for a year because that was the place to go, really, and had a really fascinating year because this was when Toronto alternative theatre was really taking off. It was just post-farm show time, and there was so much crazy stuff going on. But somewhere in all of that, I got a letter from one of the people at the U of A saying there's this MFA program at the University of Minnesota, and they're soliciting candidates, and we think you would be good. And if you'd like to apply, we'll recommend you. So I thought, wow, I've never been to the United States and Minnesota. Why not? Give it a try. I applied, and I got in. And, again, having no idea what I was getting into. It was just, I'm so glad I did it. Minneapolis is a fabulous city. And the university, it was a real surprise to me because here I was, I thought, I'll do an MFA because that will give me a chance to really perfect my work, to make, fail within an educational setting where it's not going to be such a trauma, and I can learn more and learn different things, different perspectives. But it was a very underdeveloped program. The problem was that in most American universities, I don't know if this is still the same, the undergraduate degree is very general, and they don't really get specific about something like design until a graduate degree. So the things that I was learning were things that I'd learned in my second year at U of A. And it was very technical. So I was building platforms, being a shop assistant, hanging lights. And I kept going, well, where's the art? And it didn't work out eventually very well. It was a 2-year program. In my second year, that summer, I was an assistant designer at Stratford. So I'd gone off to Stratford, and I got a very nasty letter from them saying, you've left two courses. In those days, you were allowed to take incompletes and finish them later. So I was working at night, sitting in the office at Stratford, the secretary's office, because I had to borrow a typewriter time, no computers then, trying to get all these papers and things done. And I got this very nasty letter saying that, you're really not material for our program because because I was called a Bush Foundation Fellow. I was a Bush Fellow. Bush Foundation Fellows don't take incompletes, but no one had told me. That was the whole problem. No one told me anything. So I said, well, fine then, goodbye. And I went back, and a friend of mine had wanted to do a film. And I thought, well, why not? So we got a camera and got involved with the animation sort of people. Oxberry, that's the name of the camera, the Oxberry camera that we used. And we did a lot of stills on an animation camera, and we made a film called The History of Dinkytown, which was a little small town that's part of the university. Really interesting. Pillsbury Flour, General Mills, all those things, 3M, all of them came out of that little area of Minneapolis. So it was very interesting. And we made the film, and it's either in the university archives or the Minnesota archives.
And that was your first film experience.
Yeah.
And later on, you'd find yourself designing for film. We'll get there eventually, though.
Yeah.
So how did you get your break at Stratford? Was it just people you knew through U of A? And
now, how did Stratford first happen? Oh my gosh, I should know. I know they were looking for assistant designers, and I guess I just said, "Hey, I can do this." I, must have put in a portfolio and that kind of thing. And there was a wonderful fellow there named Jack Hutt, who was Bill Hutt's brother, cousin, Bill Hutt's cousin. And he said, "Well, we have different positions here, and we're starting this thing called the Third Stage." Which that later became the Patterson Theater, and we want to do a season, and we need an assistant. And there was a wonderful designer named John Ferguson, somebody you should interview.
Yes, absolutely.
Fabulous designer. Yeah. And he needed an assistant, so I was John Ferguson's assistant, and we did the collected works of Billy the Kid, with John Wood directing, the first production of that, Michael Ondaatje's show with Michael Ondaatje before he was famous, kind of hanging around telling us stories about why he loved spaghetti westerns and why he'd written this piece of poetry, this beautiful piece of poetry. Yeah. And it was wonderful because we were in this old curling rink. Yeah. And at the time, there wasn't the permanent stage there, so we had to change it for everything. A group of French people came in, really amazing, like Monique Mercure and André Brassard, and people who are huge names now in French theater, Québécois theater, who I didn't know who they were. They just sort of came in and did a show. It was quite the experience. And then from there, I was kind of in as an assistant, right? So I went back, I think, for 5 more seasons, not consecutively. My last one was, I believe it was 1986. I assisted Tanya Maseyevich when she was doing The Government Inspector, which is a really great experience as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what else did you make your way back to Toronto and start working in small independent theater as well, like the exploding Pasmerize and factories and all that stuff that was happening back in the 70s?
Yeah, I did. When I finished at University of Minnesota, I went back to Calgary first. And I worked at the Citadel Theatre in Edmonton for a bit. John Neville was the artistic director then. And then I was hired as resident designer at Theatre Calgary. So I'm just trying to think how that... It's funny. You think you'd remember all this, right? But 40 years is a long time. I do remember working... Okay, because when did Toronto Free start? Anyway, this won't be interesting to your listeners, so I have to remember. So I was resident designer at Theatre Calgary. I moved to Toronto permanently in 1980. But before that, I spent time in Toronto working, at the beginning of Toronto Free Theatre. I'd worked at Passe Muraille when it was in Trinity Church. Paul Thompson hired me. I think he gave me $70, and he said, "Okay, what you don't spend on the show, you can keep yourself." So I think I got paid $35. Right. I was the costume designer for a show. I can't remember who directed it at that point, and I think I did another show for Passe Muraille as well. And those were really the sort of hippie, trippy times, right? At times when opportunities for youth grants and local initiatives, LIP grants, were around. And I had, that's right, I'm remembering now. I was hired I was a production assistant at what is now Can Stage. It was called the St. Lawrence Centre for the Arts. A man named Thomas Bodenestsky hired me. And I said, well, I'm a designer. I don't want to be a production assistant. And he said, okay. That's all right then. Okay, you can assist our designer, who was a man named Murray Laufer. So I assisted Murray for a year at Can Stage, St. Lawrence Centre for the Arts. And at the end of it, we did a play called Captives of the Faceless Drummer by George Riga, directed by Martin Kinch, and starring a lot of people who were in Toronto theatre at the time. It was kind of the young, radical youth show, collective creation kind of feel to it. And they all then went on to form Toronto Free Theatre and asked me if I'd do props for them. Right. So I said, sure, that sounds great to me. And it was actually the same summer that I was hired that first year at Stratford, I believe. So I left Toronto Free to go to Stratford to work at the Third Stage. Yeah. So that would have been earlier, yeah.
What a great connection. Now, what was your first big breakout design hit then? Like, what did you do what was your first professional show that you designed as the lead designer, as opposed to an assistant or a...
Would have been the Theatre Calgary shows.
Oh, yeah. So how did they? You were the resident designer. How many shows of the season did you do? The whole thing, or did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In those days, you did. I remember, actually, it was really funny. I remember I made $11,000 that season, which seemed like the best. Oh, I bought a car. I had my own apartment. And I remember Walter Learning came by from the Canada Council and said, "You're paying your designers too much." And I don't think it was a personal thing. I don't think it was me personally. But I thought, oh, that's not fair. Wait a minute. Because it was actually a living wage. Anyway, it would have been Theatre Calgary. I did 2 seasons for them, once as resident designer, and then a man named Gavin Semple came in for the next year, and I designed several of their shows. Right. And then I went to Toronto and just freelanced wherever I could. Yeah. I worked mostly at Tarragon, did a few shows for Tarragon, some stuff for Theatre Plus. I don't know if you remember old Theatre Plus. And part of all of that, I had done a show at Alberta Theatre Projects in Calgary. And John Morrell, I met the playwright John Morrell, who became a good friend, and he had written a show called A Great Noise, A Great Light, which had been a huge success in the Alberta Theatre Projects, and they wanted to take it to Tarragon. And I was in the midst of designing it, and I got a call from John saying, "I hope you're sitting down." He said, "I just talked to Bill Glasgow at Tarragon, and I'm not ready. I don't think the play's ready. I don't want to do it. I've pulled it." And I thought, oh, no, what am I going to do? And he said, "Look, I'm really, really sorry. I'm really sorry." So because I had worked at Tarragon already on a couple of shows and met the wonderful Bill Glasgow and got to work with him, I had done a show called Johannes and the Talmud, which I guess was sort of my big show that I did there. I was the costume designer on that. And I called my friend Bjarne Christensen, who was the technical director there at the time, and I said, "You remember you were telling me about this theater company that you and your friend were forming?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, that's James Roy. We're starting this company called the Blythe Theater. The Blythe Summer Festival, it was called at the time." And he said, "Yeah, we need a resident designer. Do you want to come out?" And I thought, well, yeah, that'd be great. A whole summer worth of work sounds good to me. So the next day they both called, and I did an interview with James, and I must have shown him pictures of my work and that kind of thing. And lo and behold, there I was, the resident designer, and at a crazy time in Blythe when the stage was so small that you had to design the sets so that the other sets went behind because there was no wing space. So as the season went on, your sets got smaller and smaller and smaller. So I remember the last set, it was for a play called Gwendolyn, and all I could do was put up some flats, and I painted them kind of like trees in silhouette. And we had a couple of platforms and some props, because behind those flats were a lot of set pieces.
That's a very interesting way to do rep.
Yeah.
Was it all built? It was all built in the theater as well, or was it built in the offsite in a barn or something?
Well, it wasn't in a barn. There was a little space up above that used to be a Masonic. No, was it a Masonic lodge? No, it had been where the. Sean Kerwin could tell you. It's where they used to roll all the bandages. It was administrative offices, I think.
That's right.
All the
Yeah, she
bandages
said.
for the Red Cross, and it was like a time capsule in the 40s, and they opened it up, and Sean was there when they did that, and I was a couple of years later, and I came in and they built it, and it was about the size of somebody's kitchen. Where they built the sets. So most of them were done outside as well. I remember that first season, we were painting the sets outside, and we had a typical Huron County thunderstorm at 3 a.m. And we were so tired, we just didn't have the energy to even put anything away. So I just left everything painted, lying on the grass in front of the theater. The townsfolk loved it, right? It was really interesting. But it started to pour rain, and I woke up and I thought, oh no, it's all going to be ruined. But I couldn't get up. And Bjarne, bless his heart, he was staying with his family in Clinton. He got in a car or a truck or whatever he was driving, and he drove all the way to Blythe and put everything under shelter and saved. When we came in the next morning, he was a real hero. So anyway,
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What about the experience was so special, and what about it sort of made you believe that design was where it was at, or that this was what you should be doing?
Yeah, it was design and theater itself. Just to do plays about our own community was so wonderful. And the only experience I had before that, I remember doing Uncle Vanya at the Citadel, and a friend of mine who was an Aggie student from U of A had come to see it, and I said, it's Chekhov, Russian, you probably won't be able to relate. And he said, no, it's about a man losing his land. I totally understand this. And it was the first time it ever dawned on me that theater could be about something that would relate to you that deeply. It sounds odd, but I find it with my students now, the same thing. They think theater's dressing up and going to Shaw and Stratford, and it's culture, And it was so interesting because I was working as an assistant at Stratford, and that was a wonderful learning experience, but certainly within a certain theater tradition. And then to get in my car and drive 45 minutes to Blythe to work there and see shows, it was so different. And it was Anne Chislett's production of The Tomorrow Box. I remember watching, and I think the actor's name was Dean Hawes, and he was playing a fellow named Robin Thompson, because it was all in the farm show tradition, where you would go out into the community and kind of, take your characters from the people you met. And there was this very well-known farmer named Robin Thompson who was quite a personality. And when Dean walked on stage, and I think it was a scene where he had to take a teacup to get his wife to give him more coffee, he took his teaspoon and hit it against the cup. And the audience just went crazy, of course. And I realized that there was an audience that was completely connected to these plays. But also something that was important for me was being so much a part of the creation of the play. And that's something that stayed with me all my life, is that often you'd do a show at Blythe and the second act wouldn't be written yet. So you'd sit with the playwright and you'd talk about things and through lines and how the whole shape of the thing and making them realize how much a part of the dramaturgy the design was, the world, the space that you create, the characters. And being so respected and being part of all of that was such a great learning experience, which stayed with me today. As I'm remembering now, because Blythe was 78, I believe. I believe I went to Blythe in 78. Then I went back to Theatre Calgary. That's what happened. I worked at Blythe in 78. Then I became resident designer at Theatre Calgary.
Oh, okay. That was the progress there. Okay,
Yeah.
We jumped around a little bit there.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
And then I came back and I moved to Toronto sort of full-time in 80.
Yeah. Okay.
From 80 to 86, little realizing I was actually going to end up moving to Montreal to teach at Concordia.
Well, that's great. So in the meantime, so you moved back from Blythe in the early. You went to Calgary and you came back to Toronto in the early 80s. How did you find your way to Concordia? We can just start from there. I think that's a great idea.
Sure, yeah. Because I was working in 1980, I moved to Toronto permanently. And from there, I worked at CBC the CBC picked me up. I believe my first show was in 1981. I showed a show called Home Fires. And I was working off and on sort of between CBC as a freelancer and in theater. And I went to Concordia because my husband at the time was going to the National Theatre School to study design. So Concordia, it seemed like a perfect thing that they were looking for someone to teach design there. And I thought, well, this is perfect because I can have a full-time job while helping get through school. And so that's what we did. I applied and was lucky enough to get it, and was, again, a full-time tenured assistant professor there for, I believe it was 6 years. And I decided to leave for a couple of reasons. I really established myself at CBC. And I had some very good friends there who were offering me work. And I came back. I had a sabbatical after 6 years at Concordia. And I was finding the teaching there very difficult for many different reasons. Part of it was just living in Quebec and not feeling like I wasn't pure laine and I wasn't feeling at home there. And I was offered a job as an art director on Kids in the Hall by my friend Paul Ames, who was the production designer. So while I was on sabbatical, I worked for Kids in the Hall as a designer, and I loved it. And I thought, I don't think I want to stop doing this. So when Kids renewed for the next season, I said to Concordia, I'm really sorry, but I don't think... I was in my 30s at the time, and I was just afraid of becoming a bitter old teacher who was jealous of everybody else working. And though Concordia was very good and it allowed me to design shows while I was there, I wanted that film experience, and I wanted to just be much more involved in more work. I just wanted to try different things. So it was a really wise decision. And it was good as well because Concordia understood, and some of my former students ended up teaching in the program, and then they brought me back. So years later, I think about 5 or 6 years later, I went back as a resident artist there, and then they brought me back in different capacities over several years, right up until 2005. So I was still being able to come to Concordia and teach, which I loved, because it was it probably still is, I don't know, but at the time was a very dynamic training program for designers, training people for the profession. And I loved being part of that. I just didn't want to commit myself to it full time, so it worked out really well. And the other thing that was good about it was then I had teaching credentials, which have really, really helped me in the future.
It seems surprising to me that you got tenure so quickly.
I've been a very lucky person, or I'm brilliant. One of the two.
Well, I'm sure.
I think luck played a great part.
I'm sure the brilliance comes with it, but it seems like in a especially in theater, in any other kind of academic focused profession, like so I do a lot of science, so science, certainly tenure track is what a lot of people. I mean, you research and their professorship go together, right? So the two activities are closely married. And people who are in the social sciences is the same thing, right? You're doing research, you're producing material that fits within the academic environment. Whereas in theater, in many cases, everyone does their initial training and then works professionally for a number of years before they actually come back and train. In fact, I think, unlike in a university where you've got TAs that are only a few years older than the students, in many cases in theater, if that was to happen, you'd be looked on probably with a bit of suspicion, like, what do you know? You've only been doing this for 2 or 3 years, and we want the people who are senior to tell us about how things get done, right? Is that
well,
true?
I guess by the time I got to Concordia, I had a substantial body of work behind me, and also the film, TV at that point, very little film work. So I think they liked all of that, and I continued to keep that up. And then while I was at Concordia, or maybe just before, I was president of the Associated Designers of Canada as well. So I had a lot of credentials that they respected. It was a program that really respected professional credentials as opposed to published work. And so I was tenure track. I think I got tenure after, you can apply generally in most programs, I think, around after your 3rd or 4th year. So I did apply for tenure, I believe, around that time. So I'd only been tenured a year or so when I actually left Concordia, which was pretty unheard of.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think I must have been crazy.
That's right.
When I think back on it now.
And at the same time, though, you went to CBC and worked on an iconic Canadian comedy show
it was
called
great.
Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
So how was that? First of all, what was your position? You were the art director.
Art director. There
Yeah.
was two art directors. There was a production designer, Paul Ames, and then Doug McLean, who's another theater designer, former theater designer, and I were both art directors. Doug did the studio portions, and I did the film portions.
Oh, I see. So maybe you could explain, because I'm in theater. I don't have any experience in film or TV. What is the role of an art director as opposed to production designer, and how do you fit into that kind of system?
Well, interestingly, on kids, it was different than traditionally. Usually, on a big film, the art director is the person who they're kind of like the production manager. Mm-hmm. They're the person who organizes crews, does budgeting, all that kind of thing. Mm. On Kids in the Hall, I was actually a designer. Mm-hmm. I was called an art director, but Doug and I he designed all the studio sets along with Paul, and I designed all the film sets along with Paul. So Paul was overseeing all of it, but we got to do all it because it was sketch comedy, right? Mm-hmm. So we would churn out those sets. It was crazy. We would sit as soon as they figured out what the slate was going to be for that time of filming. We just sit down and we just draw like crazy. Not draft, but do drawings of what each set would look like. Mm-hmm. Get Paul to approve it, and then we'd pass it on to the drafts people who would draw them up to be done. And it was a bit like a factory, and we'd work very late often to get that stuff out because time in film is money. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot of stuff that has to happen. So Kids was a bit different that way. When I worked in film later, I worked as an art director on a couple of shows, but I really didn't enjoy it because I actually don't like organizing things. I rather design. So I worked off, my preference was to work as a set designer who comes under the art director. Right. So on a big feature film, for example, there'll be a lot of set designers, and you spend your time really creating the set, but you're usually drafting it as well, which I kind of enjoy doing. I don't mind doing that.
Sure. How about set decoration and I guess it's just a bunch of delegation. You're coming up with the vision, mm-hmm. and then you're communicating that to other people who go out and fill in all the gaps.
Yeah. Well, in film, props and set decoration are separate. Right. Set dec is everything like curtains and the furniture and that, and props are everything the performers deal with. Right. So they're very different departments, and you work with props, but not as much as you do with set dec. Set dec's a very vital part of the whole art department.
Right. Excellent. Thank you for indulging my ignorance.
That's okay.
I haven't done a lot. I know there's probably listeners who know a lot more about it than I do.
Yeah. But also, I mean, I think that something you might be going to ask me this now, mm-hmm. is that there's a real difference in design for film than mm-hmm. for theater. Film is much more about going into spaces and creating architecture in a space. I think that's probably why a lot of architects become film designers. Mm-hmm. Well, theater is much more poetic. It's much more about the script and creating abstract visions of the piece. We're working much more metaphorically, much more symbolically, and to me is much more interesting than film. The big kicks I would get in film were when we would go to an empty lot and turn it into something. Right. Building buildings between two buildings that look like a real building. Right. All that kind of crazy illusion. Yeah. Always fascinated me in film, and you really learn detail work in film that make you a much better realistic kind of theater designer. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot about building codes, moldings, details. So at film, I've worked with designers. I remember one show I did. I can't remember what it was called. It was called Focus, I think. It was an Arthur Miller play, mm-hmm. and they flew me down to New York for a day, and I spent the entire day at this subway museum. Mm-hmm. Measuring all the details of a subway car. Right. And then I had to go back and reproduce the subway car. I drew it all up, and they built a subway car. It was very cool. But the designer was saying things to me like, well, you know the little gold line that they put on the paint? Is that a 1/4 of an inch, or is it a 1/2 inch? Like, oh my God. Right. Film, is so different. You don't worry about that in theater.
That's right, because then close up, someone's going to see that and go, oh my God.
Oh, it's not right.
1/4 inch,
yeah.
and I wrote a letter, and then today we tweet about it and blog about
exactly,
it, and it'll be a giant. That's awesome. So Kids in the Hall in general, I mean, that's what was your experience working with the cast, and how did you, I mean, it must have been a great place. You were on. Were you on set a lot, or was it something? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what we did is we'd have filming periods, or I don't know what you call it. The scripts would come down. We'd work out what the sets would look like. Then we would do I would go off with all the film things, and we'd shoot them in all different kinds of locations. Then we'd have studio sets that were being built. So once the film stuff was finished with, we'd go into studio. So I was there in the studio for setup, and I would do some studio sets because sometimes there were so many. And we would have, I'm trying to remember, was it 1 or 2 live shows, and then we would do more studio work without an audience, stuff that was too difficult or stuff that had messed up. Right. And so that we would redo all that stuff that would be all edited together. And sorry, I've forgotten what your question was.
I was just curious about your interaction with the cast and being on set, and
Well,
what was that
they
like?
said, yeah. Well, as they say, comedy is very serious business.
Right.
It was tricky. The cast, the guys got along and didn't get along. They would all write sketches, and there was a lot of contention about whose sketch was going to be picked. It was kind of funny the way it was laid out, because their offices were a floor above us, or 2 floors above us, and we were all on 1 floor, and the whole art department was right next to where the producers were. And the final decisions about things like that were made in the producer's office. So we would often be there working along very diligently, and one of the kids would go in, and then another one would go in, and the door would close, and then you'd hear shouting, and then people would really shout. I remember one time Dave Foley, really, a stream of profanity, screaming away, walked out, looked at us, and went, "Sorry, guys," and left. He was a very nice guy. Yeah, sure. Yeah. And we had more interaction with some of the kids directed a lot of the episodes. Dave and Bruce directed a lot, and Mark did some. They directed a lot of the episodes. So we had a lot of more interaction with them than we would have with Scott and Kevin, who didn't have as much to do with that part of things. Right. But we knew them all. It was a very small group of people, and we all got along, and or didn't at times. But it was a nice show to work on. It was really lovely at the end of it. I was sad to see it go.
Yeah. As were we all. Now tell me about Fraggle Rock. This is part of my, late...
Dance your cares away.
Oh, my God, it's fantastic.
Worries for another day. Let the music play.
Yeah, exactly. The Henson Show shot in CBC in Toronto.
Yeah, Studio 4.
How did you get... Because you didn't start as the art director, didn't start as a designer on that. You got brought in for the last season.
Yes, well, I was a sort of part of, an assistant designer at CBC, and my friend Marianne Wehack, who also was a theater designer, who's now a film designer, she had done Fraggle for, I think, the first 3 seasons, but she wanted to do her own work, and I think she was actually designing a film at that point or something. So I luckily, I don't know, I hadn't thought about it until you interviewed me, but I seem to have stumbled into a lot of stuff just by luck. Okay. And they needed someone to be an assistant designer. The production designer at that point was a man named Russell Chick. So I came in and assisted Russell for that season, and it was such a good time, such a great time. They were the most wonderful people. Yeah. And they've had a couple of reunions since, and I was saying that there's a YouTube thing of posted, several different things, but of a crew shot that we had at one point, and it was so great to go, oh, there's so-and-so, I haven't seen them. The wonderful thing about the whole Henson crew is nobody was stuck up. They were just regular people. Mm-hmm. And after you got over the, oh my gosh, that's Jim Henson, yes. Then you just relaxed, and you were just doing a show with people.
That's right. Yeah, I'm not working with Kermit, I'm working with Jim.
Yeah,
because he sounds so much.
Yes.
So what was your role? You were the set designer
on Fraggle. I was just assistant. I was just a baby assistant at the time. So maybe most of my job was running around and watching the camera with these set deck people and putting moss on styrofoam rocks, because the way the whole thing worked, everything was elevated off the floor. Yeah. They were on these puppet stands that were adjustable. So the entire world of Fraggle Rock was styrofoam rocks that you could put to different levels, and when they shot it, they would set up the shot, and then you had to adjust all the rocks and the big sort of tunnel rocks. We had names for all of them to fit the shot. And then you had to cover a lot of it with flowers or moss or whatever the theme of the piece was at the time. So I spent all my time on set. on that one. And I would also do some drafting for special things. We did this one deadly show. It was a water show. So we had this giant pool of water, and all the poor puppeteers, they had to be under this pool with their hands in gloves, and then the puppets went on the gloves, creating this whole water sequence. We shot till, I don't know, 6 a.m, something like that. I finally left at 6, I think. And I remember coming into the studio the next day, and there was a big sign up that said, "No more water shows." It was brutal. That one was, very memorable.
That's terrific. Maybe we can find that on YouTube.
Yeah, probably.
Now, you also did actual film, commercial film work, right?
Yeah.
Pushington is one line in your CV, but it's one of those. It's the John Cusack air traffic controller guy. Did you work on it from beginning to end, or were you brought in?
No, I was brought in.
Right.
There was 2 set designers on it already, and I was brought in basically because they needed someone to do all the other bits and pieces. There's a lot of work. You measure locations. I was very much junior on that show, but it was funny. It was really nice because traditionally in Toronto, there's not that much film work in the wintertime. So it was this wonderful January, February gig that I got. But what was ironic is the whole point of the show is there's this giant snowstorm that closes the airport down, and they have to bring the planes in and all this. And of course, it was one of those winters in Toronto where there was absolutely no snow. So they ended up making snow. It's just like, oh.
That's ironic.
Yeah.
I remember they shot Cinderella Man in my neighborhood down at Queen and Roncesvalles, Queen and Carlisle. Yeah. And I lived on Degrassi, or just off of Degrassi.
Yeah.
And it was shot in the middle of the summer in August, and the entire thing, they had resodded all the buildings. It was the most magical thing to walk in the middle of in your neighborhood, right? Yeah. But I remember they shot a winter scene in the middle of August, and the whole thing was just made up, people in big woolen things in the middle of August in Toronto, which must have been terrible. But that kind of magic, I feel, in film, you have so much more control over the frame, right?
It just reminded me of a kids episode where we had to have winter in the summer. And again, I had to find the one street in Toronto that didn't have trees on it. Right. And then we had to make snow, and everyone had to pretend they were cold. And then, of course, we shot all kinds of stuff in the winter that had to look like everyone was warm. Yeah. That was some brutal 30 below shooting days on Kids in the Hall.
Yeah, I can imagine. Great. So let's just go back to theater for a second. I want to talk about the Black Bonch Bill, Willie McCrimmon, which is one of the shows you did at Blythe, but you had actually premiered the show before that, and I think we did it in Blythe in 97, which was a great show with... for people who don't know the show, it's Woolie's rink against the Devil's rink, and it's a deal with not a deal with the devil, not like a Faustian tale, but it's along that kind of line.
Yes.
And they have this big battle in the second act. So first of all, tell me about how you got your connection to the show originally, and what it was like to work on the first production.
Yeah.
It's a W.O. Mitchell play, right?
Yeah, W.O. Mitchell's story. That Theatre Calgary decided they wanted to make into a play. And I think I was resident designer at the time. And the director was a man named Guy Sprung, who came out from Montreal to direct it. And he worked with Bill Mitchell to create the script, such as it was. W.O. Mitchell was an absolutely wonderful man. He chewed tobacco. He'd have this big woolly sweater and all these like tobacco stains on the front of it. He was chewing tobacco, and the loveliest guy. But you couldn't pin him down on anything. He'd sit in the theater and tell us all these great stories, and you go, but what about the second act, Bill? We got to do something with the second act. Oh, you'll be fine. It doesn't. But yes, it is. It's about Wooly and his very salty guy, rink of guys, all named Charlie Brown. From Wild Rose, Alberta in the 1930s, and they're the crack curling team of all time. And one day the devil walks into Woolie's shop to have his curling boots resold. And the devil makes a deal with Woolie because he hears Woolie saying, "I'd give my soul to win the McDonald Briar." And the devil comes in and goes, "You got a deal, Willie McCrimmon." It was Michael Ball playing the devil. And so there's a bet. It's the devil, Judas Iscariot, Macbeth, and Guy Fawkes, or his team, and they come from hell, and they play off for the immortal soul of Wooly, and the entire second act is a curling match.
Yeah. Did you have the curling? Everyone calls you to find out how you did the curling match on stage.
Yeah.
I know in Blythe we had real rocks, I believe.
Oh yeah, always you have to have real rocks.
Because it looks totally fake.
Yeah,
if it ain't
it's
real
when
rocks.
they hit, right? You've got to have the real
right.
rocks. But it was interesting. I decided to put the whole thing outside. I can't remember why. I think I just thought it would look better. And what we did is we built snowbanks and fencing and stuff so that you could only kind of see the rocks. So you could get the sense of the rocks hurling down the rink. But the trick is that they often don't make the shot. Right. Right? And you had to go, okay, let's make it so nobody can see that the button at the end there. And the advantage of Theatre Calgary, which is the old Theatre Calgary when it was in the Allied Arts Centre, it was very wide. It was like a big letterbox. I think it was 40 feet wide, something like that. So we did the entire thing on a diagonal to increase the length. It was still nowhere near the length of a real curling rink. But you could actually kind of approximate it, and it was just sheets of masonite painted and then varathaned and then painted and varathaned and sanded and to sort of an inch of their life. And then we went to, I think, a chemical company, CIL or DuPont or something like that. And the secret was silicon, putting it on the rocks, putting it on everything. We put it in, there's a part where one of the characters waters the rink. Right. And we put silicone in the water, and you could actually slide on it. Yeah. But it was a fun thing. It was a silly fun show. But I have to tell you that the first time that rock went down the rink, the audience cheered. Yeah. Because they're waiting for it, right? Yeah. The whole thing's a setup. And an intermission, because they do the first act, and the bet's on, and then there's an intermission, and people were coming up and kind of looking and going, how are they going to do this, right? Oh, they're going to have something fake. They're going to have rocks on wheels or something. And then there was that sliding down and that thunk kind of sound, right, of the two rocks hitting, and people cheered. It was great. Yeah,
that kind of, when that works in theater, it's funny how in film you take reality for granted. Yeah. And then when it happens live on stage, people are so floored by it because they're not expecting something so fake, and yet it can be really real.
Yeah, and then it toured all through Alberta, which was crazy because we had the tiniest stages and the largest stages. It was. I don't know how they did it.
Touring with curling rocks doesn't sound like a good idea.
No, but they did it, and I never heard. I had to go around and look at a lot of the theaters to see, and we had a rink that had pieces that came out, right, so longer or shorter. But anyway, it's all in the fun.
That's fantastic. And then you did that show several other times, right? You did not. It wasn't
we did
just
it at Blythe.
Calgary.
We did it at Theatre New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember at Blythe, we used to have a. First of all, can I just say that the set, which was modular, because you have to have Wooly's shop, and then there's an outdoor version of Wooly's shop, and then there's the rink, and the devil has to disappear down to hell. It has to be a trap door.
Yeah. Oh, it's got a lot of
it's a lot of tricks. Yeah, exactly. And we used to. We used to take bets, because I was running the show at that point. We used to take bets how long it would take Cliff Saunders, who was playing pipe fitting, how long it would take him to leave Wooly's shop after his last line in the first act. His very first scene, he comes in, he has a little interaction, and then the devil comes in and interrupts them, or he interrupts the devil, and then he has to exit, and he would take a minute and a half with all these pratfalls and plunger tricks, and it was just the most incredible thing. But the set was on a stage that is really just 18 feet wide and 12 feet deep.
Most frustrating thing about Blythe.
And yet the show looked enormous, right? And I think that's a testament to your ability to scale things properly, and it just looked beautiful. I think that the set. I think there's probably pictures on the Blythe. We'll try to find some photographs.
I don't think I have photos of that one. I have photos of another production at Theatre New Brunswick.
Well, you know what would be great if you could forward that to me. We'll put them on we'll put them in the little.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that would be good.
We can put them on the website so people can see it. It is quite a thing. And if you're doing Black Bunch Bill Willie McCrimmon,
yeah, you know who to call, folks.
Pat Flood for how to do the curling rocks. I remember they were rehearsing above the offices at Blythe, and so all you heard all day was slam when they were trying to practice with the actual real curling rocks above.
Oh dear,
it was incredible.
Yeah.
Great. So tell me about what's next. Any other kind of big shows that you did in the 80s? And well, I think it's probably good to talk about Our Country's Good.
Yeah.
Because you've got you've teaching under your belt. You've done film. You've done TV. You've done a whole bunch of theater, and now you leave the country for the first time to go to Ireland, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think we'll get into this at some point, but I've always found it ironic about my career is that the place I've worked most is like the Blythe Festival, is a place that does fairly quote unquote realistic work. Although I said, I've managed to work at Blythe for many, many, many years without ever having to do a box set. And it's odd though, because we talk about Black Bonspiel, that kind of thing, because I've never thought that realism or naturalism was particularly my forte or was particularly interesting. So it is kind of interesting that I've ended up with so many shows or being associated with the theater that tends to do more of that kind of thing. Our Country's Good, I think, was an important show for me because it allowed me to, that and a production of Uncle Vanya that I also did at the Centaur, both of them allowed me to do much more of what I think is more my forte as a designer is really kind of creating simple sets, clean sets that, or it's not even a set, it's a world, it's, a context, a world that sort of responds to what the piece is about. And I was really proud of that design. It ended up being very simple. I remember actually when I was doing it, I called Peter Hartwell, who'd originally done the production in England at the Royal Court. And I remember him saying to me something about, just be careful you don't do a heavy metaphor or something. And I thought, what is he talking about? Because I didn't even think like that, right? But I guess there is a sort of school of design thought where you think of it like, I don't know, they're all trapped, so it's a big bird cage or something. I don't know. I don't know how that works. And I thought, oh, how interesting. I never would have occurred to me. The set that I did was just a very simple piece of, I don't know, hard to describe on a podcast, but it's sort of an angled platform that was all sort of wood, and 3 curtains that moved around on a big curtain track and became curtains in houses, became the big tent that they're in, became trees. It was simple and very effective. The lighting, originally done by Louise Guinon, I believe she did the first production that I did at Centaur, where we had just a black scrim with a painted drop behind. But it ended up being extremely magical because of the way the drop, she lit it and it changed and became many different things. And it was a simple show. It was really a success. It was directed by a man named Joe Dowling, who had come over from Ireland to direct it. And we did it again at Neptune in Halifax because it had been such a success. And one day the phone rang. I was actually on my way to Australia. And the phone rang, and it was Joe calling from Ireland. And he said, we've just had a show canceled here at the gate where I'm working, and I want to do Our Country's Good. And I've told them the only way I'll do it is if you come over and design it. And I thought, wow, how wonderful that is. So they brought me over to work at the gate. And I only did the set. They had an Irish costume designer, which was great. It was nice to have another designer as part of it. And the Gate is a fairly well-established theatre in Dublin. It's kind of maybe the Abbey alternative. I don't know. It's known a lot for its productions of Samuel Beckett. And what was interesting to me is that it's brought in a lot of designers from different countries. And I was treated really well there. What the most interesting part of it was they expected I was an international designer. I wasn't little Pat Flood coming from Canada, but they just said, well, have you ever designed in Japan? Or have you ever, have you done anything at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden or whatever? And because a lot of the designers who came through just did that. And it was really wonderful to be in that kind of world because you started to think of yourself differently. And you would think, well, why not? Because I realized we do have a Canadian inferiority complex, which I've always fought against. Yes. No, we don't. No, we don't. We're just as good as everyone else. But for the first time, I realized that within myself, I had that. And it's certainly something, when you sent me the list of questions you might want to ask me, to talk about flops and what you learn from flops and that kind of thing. And it's certainly that plus a production I did at the Stratford Festival, because I'd been an assistant there for many, many years. And then they hired me to design Two Gentlemen of Verona. And it was probably one of my most disastrous shows. I was trying to do punk before punk kind of came to Canada. No one knew what was going on. The director changed his idea halfway through and wanted to do it differently because Lorena McKennitt was doing the music. And he suddenly wanted it to be this kind of more soft piece, whereas I'd done people with mohawks and painted faces and crazy stuff. And I had a lot of the staff, the technical people at Stratford look at me going, what is this ugly stuff, right? John Hirsch said, but it's all rags. I don't understand. Why would you want to put rags on our actors? And I didn't have the confidence to stand up for myself.
Right.
And I remember David Walker, who was a wonderful designer who worked there at the time, one point just stopping me in one of the halls and saying, the only thing you can do ultimately as a designer is stand up for yourself. Mm-hmm. Just stick to your guns. Because it's who you are, it's what you've got. And if you don't stay with what you're doing, you have nothing else. Mm-hmm. And it was such good advice. And it wasn't, I think, until I then later got to the gate and was treated like an international designer that I really kind of came into my own and realized, yes, I can do this. Mm-hmm. And my work was of that quality, that no one questioned it. It was, of course, you're an international designer, and we've brought you over from Canada to do this. And it was like, oh my goodness, yes, right? So that was a great learning experience for me.
That's terrific.
Hi there, I'm interrupting briefly to thank those 12 of you, including Carla Arose, Liz Campbell, and Aaron Birkenbergs, who all supported the $5 level, for supporting the title block on patreon.com. I really enjoy doing the show, and I'm not going to stop while I have the time, but it does cost a bit to do the show between equipment and web hosting, not to mention extra mic rentals to ensure that special events like the Bellows sound as best as I can make them, even when I don't. So I'm asking that you help to cover those costs and help me to continue to capture the story of Canadian theatre design. Go to patreon.com/the Title Block Podcast and donate a couple of bucks an episode. It really helps. Now, back to my interview with designer Pat Flood.
Any other kind of big shows before we get into the more present stuff?
Well, I think for me, just a lot of good, interesting productions. I was able to work on a production of Uncle Vanya I was very proud of, but I went into film. Mm-hmm. And so the film work, working with Adam McGoyan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great, I want to talk about that, because you've done a number of his shows, right? Ararat and another...
just the two, Ararat and Where the Truth Lies.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so tell me about that. First of all, how did you get hired? What was your experience, and how did you approach it? Since at this point, this is one of the few times it sounds like that you're starting from the beginning. You're able to sort of shape. You're not coming into an already established thing, or you weren't assisting on it. Is that right?
No, I was a set designer.
You're a set designer. Okay, great. So tell me about the experience.
I had actually been working as an art director and set designer for a while. Mm-hmm. Before that, and at CBC, but then I was art director. I did the last season of La Femme Nikita, shows like that, and the time on Kids in the Hall, and so I had by that time knew quite a few people, and Kathleen Climie, who was the art director for working with Adam on another show, said we're doing this new show called Ararat. Mm-hmm. And we have a new production designer named Philip Barker, and he'd like to meet new people and work with new people. So do you want to come in? So I met Philip and really liked him, really got on with him, and they hired me to work on the show. It's about the Armenian genocide, and something I had never known anything about. We all know about the Holocaust, but the sort of what happened to the Armenians was equally horrible. And so I was hired to design a lot of the sets with Philip, again, as the production designer. But it was wonderful to work with him because he gave me a lot of free rein on the stuff that we did. And we built the whole town of Van, where there's the escape from Van is sort of a similar part of it, on Cherry Beach in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And that was one of those great, oh, wow, this is really cool. And we had another designer named Emir Gelio, who was actually a Bosnian and knew that world very well. So Emir and I became very good friends and spent a lot of time arguing. And he would say, no, it would never be like that. They wouldn't do this. And I said, yeah, but it's already built. We can't change it now. Right. Like, we'll just change the hinges. We'll do something here. But it was great because he was able to add a level of authenticity to it as well. But we built that, and it's, funny thing about film, one of the actors wasn't available at a certain time to shoot the things in sequence. So there's a big scene when they burn the town of Van when people are escaping. But we had to actually shoot that first. So we had to build the entire thing, do all the burnt stuff, and then we had to clad it over with the unburnt stuff. So, and then take it off later, right? Or no, put it on. We shot it and then we put it back on. So that was a fun thing. And there really is nothing like being on a film and creating these worlds in a real world. I remember I just thinking when I did this show called Home Fires, which is an early CBC show, but there was took place during the Second World War, and I remember one night we were filming in this Polish Legion Hall or something, and there was a big dance going on, and everyone, it was like soldiers, coming back, having a big dance while they were on furlough. And we were just taking a break, and all the guys were sitting there in their uniforms, and the girls were in their 40s clothing. And you would swear the band was playing in the background. You would swear you were in the 40s. We were all sitting on a fire escape, and it was just really like time travel. It was beautiful. Yeah, and then I continued to work with Atom Egoyan on the next film, which was Where the Truth Lies. Now I say I worked with Atom Egoyan. I knew him. He would come into the art department. We would show him the things. He's a lovely man. And when you work, there's a real difference working on a Canadian film as opposed to an American film. Aside from my Fraggle Rock experience, where they were fabulous people, a lot of American films are very much, let's just shoot it, let's get it done, get out of here kind of thing. And actually, I remember someone saying that they often refer to us as Mexicans in sweaters, right. Canadians as Mexicans in sweaters. But working on a Canadian film, there's a much nicer sense of togetherness. I also worked on Slings and Arrows.
I wanted to talk about that as well, because that is sort of an iconic theater.
Yeah, fabulous show.
And
yeah.
I have not. I've seen maybe one episode. I haven't been able to sort of find the rest of it. But it is not an airing of dirty laundry, but it is kind of like a fictionalization of what happens. In Stratford,
the first episode I show my students all the time. I say, look, this is real. Yeah. All of this is real, and I owe all of that to Kathleen Climie again, both the Atom Egoyan and Slings and Arrows, because in both cases she was the production designer for Slings and Arrows and just brought me in for a few episodes to work on. They were doing a production of the Scottish play, and they needed a set model, and they needed someone who actually could design a theater set. So she said, I know just the person. I'll bring in Pat Flood. So it was great. So I got to do that. It was, I think, the second season when we did that one. And then we did this other crazy thing about, it was Colm Feore playing this mad advertising executive guy, so we had to create his world as well. So that was really fun. But in both cases, that Kids in the Hall, working with Atom Egoyan, such a wonderful sense of community and support, and people weren't just numbers. He really created a wonderful atmosphere, and Where the Truth Lies was really fun because we shot it partly in England, partly in Los Angeles, and partly in Toronto. And I remember Adam saying, it's great, we're going to go down and we're going to change all the street signs in LA to Toronto signs. just for a change, because I did this other show called the New Ghostwriter Mystery Series. And it was an American company. It was CBS and Children's Television Network. And we shot it in sort of the junction area of Toronto. And we would show up on the streets about 6:30 in the morning. And the first hour and a half was spent changing all the street signs and putting garbage on the street so it looked more like New York.
That's right.
One time we put all the garbage out, and we'd left it the night before because we were shooting, and the garbage collectors came and picked it all up, and it was all our prop garbage.
Welcome to Canada.
Welcome to Canada. We clean up.
Yeah, we clean up after you.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, let's move into more of a philosophy question as well, and then we can get into the teaching stuff. So Is there anything special? I've spoken a number of times with a number of designers about their own design philosophy and their approach to doing theater, and it tends to be all basically the same kind of structure based on the script and discussions with the director and doing their own research. Is there anything that you feel that you do that is different from that, or that is your own sort of special way of finding your way into a piece, or is it really just a standard?
Oh, okay. I would say
script-based?
that more and more I have found a lot of designers nowadays feel that their job is somehow to execute what the director wants, which you think, well, isn't it? Is that your job? But to me, it's to work as a co-director. I know there are directors now who really design the show as well, and they would rather work with someone who can execute things well technically. I, as a designer, feel that my job is to take where the director's going and work just as closely with the director and the actors as I do with the technical people. That I remember Gina Wilkinson, we were talking about her, the wonderful, wonderful Gina Wilkinson, who died far too young. That she was, I did a show with her at Blythe. I was really lucky to do a show with her. And she was so surprised that I would show up at rehearsals and talk to her about stuff. And she said, well, I'm not used to this. Like, aren't you in the shop? And I said, well, of course I'm in the shop, but I want to know how rehearsal went. How are the characters working? Is the set working for you? I spent a lot of time, especially at that one. It was called The Eyes of Heaven by Beverly Cooper. And when they were in the initial stages, it was a new piece again. I went into their readings and I laid out, a possible floor, a possible way that it could work. And that was a surprise to her, that a designer would want to be involved at that level. But I said, well, I've been working at Blythe. I know that things are going to be rewritten, things are going to change, so I want to be part of the dramaturgy. And I know there are designers who do this, that being part of how the show is shaped is so important, because we are a visual language and an oral language as well, right? And we are so much a part of how we communicate to an audience. You don't go to the theater to hear, you go to see a play, right?
Right.
And that was a Cameron Porteous quote, but it's true.
Yeah.
And it's so important to do that. And my students don't realize that either. I say to them, okay, think about Hamlet. You have to have a castle for Hamlet. Well, there's about 1 million different castles in the world. So how do you decide what kind of castle it is? Or is it a castle at all? My favorite joke is, how many designers does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, well, does it have to be a light bulb, right?
Yes, exactly.
And so how do you decide? A technician will go, okay, well, I can do castles, I can do concrete, I can do trees. I've got this great way to make trees. I can do styrofoam rocks. I can do anything for you. But how do you decide? Well, you decide by what the piece is about. Because there's a Hamlet castle, but there's a Walt Disney castle. They're very different. Yeah. And what is a castle anyway? It's a seat of power. Is the play about power? Yes. So how do you embody the power in that world that you create? And that's the fun about being a designer, is that you create worlds. Whether your costumes, your setting, your lighting, your sound, they all create a world that then the actors enhance, the actors can create with. So we're all part of that team. And it's funny, one of the things I really learned about teaching in Montreal and at Concordia is I was there from 1986 to 1992, which was really very much a golden age of theater in Montreal, I think. Theater companies like Carbon 14, for example, and Usinsei, which was then created there. I saw wonderful, wonderful work. Things at the Théâtre Nouveau Monde that I had never thought about theater that way before, and it was very eye-opening for me. And I always make the joke that I had English and French students that I taught, and I would always have to say to the French students, oh, wow, it's amazing, it looks fabulous, but what has it got to do with the play? Right. And with the English students, I'd say, okay, you're being very true to the script, but can you push it a little bit? Just because it says there's a castle, or there's a counter, or there's this, you don't actually have to have it, Okay. You can... What's this play about? What's the meaning in this piece? Where are we going? How does what you're doing visually reflect what this play is saying, what the playwright's saying? And I think sometimes in English Canada we have too much reverence for the script. I know, I can see, and now I can see Judith Thompson bursting through my door. But of course you respect the script, but it's only one element of the piece. And you have to take every play back to when the play was first written. And again, that was that Blythe experience. To know what the initial ideas were, why they made that decision. Why is Act 2 the way it is? Why is that scene here? Why isn't it here? Was there another character that got written out? Or is there a through line? That one of my old teachers used to call it pattern recognition. What are the patterns that go through? That it's not making sense here because we're going through this, but all of a sudden this is stopped. Why is it stopped? Why doesn't it repeat? Or what's happening? So those are always really important things as a designer to think about.
So I had a discussion with Steve Lucas back in September, and that was at the beginning. It was after the first premiere. Was it Banana Boys at the factory? Which
Banana
is the
Boys was great.
Great show. But it was the first play in their naked season where they
he saw that version.
Yes,
Yeah.
they scaled back. And
Banana Boys has never been a big set, though.
Right. Well, yeah, they made some good chord. I mean, Crackwalker is part of that whole sequence
Yeah.
now, and they did the whole season's been sort of pared back and focusing on the script and the words and the actors. They have all their own reasons for doing that. Do you think that they're missing something by excluding those elements, or by making a choice to make the season very minimalist?
Well, I haven't seen them, which is sad for me because I was a factory subscriber. Sure. Because when I saw the season, I thought, I want to see this. Yeah. I just haven't had time. I'm going to Crackwalker. I've seen Banana Boys a couple of times, and I suspect it was very similar. It depends on the show. I always say that one of my favorite quotes is from Peter Brook's The Empty Space. I can take any space and call it a theater, and all it takes is for one, I forget the exact quote, is one person to walk across that space whilst another is watching them for an act of theater to be created or engaged, I think he says. And I think that's a really good way to train designers. Start with empty. Start with your audience and actor relationship. You're part of that. You don't have to assume that. What are you assuming? And start with what can you add then? Maybe it's just sound we need here. And maybe it's the sound of the floor and how people move on that floor. Maybe we don't need much more. So I think it is always really important to pare back. The thing that I always say to my students, too, that makes me crazy is when the curtain opens at a piece of theater and the audience applauds. What are they applauding? Or they'll say to me, "Oh, wow, look at that cool set." And I'll say, "Well, how do you know it's a good set? How do you know it's a good set? You don't know until you've seen the play." Because the only way a design works, set, costumes, light, sound, is during the 2.5, 3 hours of a play. Yeah. And that's what's frustrating to me, because a lot of people think it's the costume designs or the models, the set models. Of course, they would, because they're the artifacts that are left over, but they don't have the life of the play as part of them anymore. And they think that that's really just what we do, is that. But we're creating moments in time.
Yeah, I agree. When Sean Kerwin, when I was asking Sean Kerwin about production photos, this may have been in the middle of the interview, but I think it was afterwards. She doesn't keep production photos because to her, or she doesn't have a lot of them, because to her they don't tell the story. The story needs to have a four-dimensionality to it, right?
That's why a lot of us storyboard shows too, right? See how they move through time and space. You have to, because it's you can't conceive of set without lighting, sound. It's I think a lot of us think in terms of that as like a scenographer, or production designer, and that one element is part of another element. And it's frustrating sometimes when it's divided up and there's several different designers. I think that originally came from a kind of an American musical thing. Where the thing time was money again. Yeah. I personally love working with other designers. I recently did a show at Theatre Calgary with a wonderful lighting designer, and that was great just to have him there as part of it. His name was Jason Hand, and he did a wonderful job, and just have that other designer there going, "Oh, don't you think, no, wait a minute, you designed that. Shouldn't we have that? Like I had real lighting instruments on the set. He said, there's only a couple on the set. Why is that? Oh, well, the union and time. And, well, no, we have to have them. We have to have them. Good for you. Thank you, Jason. And so it's nice to have the support often of other designers. But at the same time, I think as a designer, you have to think about, you have to design the whole thing.
Yeah. And how do you find yourself negotiating those things with in a collaboration like that? Like, what happens if the costume designer has an idea that's bigger than yours, or the concept is they've got a vision of the show that's different?
And honestly, I've never had that situation.
Yeah.
I guess I've just been lucky to work with a lot of really empathetic designers on the same wavelengths, whatever. I usually design sets and costumes for my shows, so maybe that makes it a bit easier.
Yeah.
But no, it's always been, I guess, if it would happen, the director would negotiate that, maybe. But we've always kind of all gotten along with that, and you know where to step back. If they've got a better idea, well, more power to them.
That's great. Okay. Are there any themes? I know that theater design is very plastic in that you can go from show to show and never repeat an idea. But there are some designers who have who are more, I call them auteurs, or they've got an approach where you can pick out their shows. At one point, Astrid Jansen had she was in love with wire mesh, and so she did 3 or 4 shows over a period of 2 or 3 years, and they all had wire mesh in them. You go, oh, that's an Astrid Jansen show, or Jim Plaxton show with his black box kind of thing.
Yeah.
That he does so well. Have you ever had anything like that, or do you really just try to start with a blank page and go from there?
I'm just looking at my set models. We're sitting in my office, and I'm looking at all the set models sitting around. No, I don't think I have. Although I think I went through a period where I was painting things brown a lot,
Right.
but that wasn't necessarily a good thing.
Right.
But no, I do try to start from. I feel that sets often have a kind of need a neutrality to them in a way, to step back a bit. I don't like sets that kind of take over. I don't like those ones that get applause, although I certainly admire them sometimes.
Sure.
No, fascinatingly enough, I don't think there's anything like that, because I guess I start with the play. What does the play mean, and how can I bring that to life? So again, going to the Hamlet thing, what kind of a castle is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, what about approaching the play you've done in the past again? So, for example, Bonspiel. So you did it originally, and you did the tour. So those things are connected. You have to have different solutions for touring than you have in a play that's not touring. But what about remounting it with a different director and looking at the script again? How do you go back and rely on the original choices, or do you try to?
Oh, I try as much as I can to change it. Yeah. It's ironic. This is just happened recently. It was the same director. We did this play called Dear Johnny Dear by Ken Cameron at Blythe, and it was a very successful show, so Theatre Calgary picked it up. And it was fascinating. I wonder how many other designers find that they actually realize what they should have done for their design just about first dress.
Right.
You work on it, and then you sit there in dress rehearsal and you go, oh man, this is how I should have done it. Why didn't I see that? And that one was interesting that way, because the original set, Eric Coates, who was directing it, and I had really just seen something black. And then as the music played and the stories came out, that it would kind of create itself. And somehow that evolved into, we just used some barn board and kept it very, very, very simple. And I made the joke, I've been at Blythe for how many years, and I'm finally doing a set with barn board.
That's right.
So it took me that long, 20 years, to do a set with barn board. Yeah. And then when Theatre Calgary picked it up, Theatre Calgary is a huge space. Yeah. And Dennis Garnham, who's the artistic director, said, look, I want a big show, because it's a Canadian musical, and the audience pays for a musical. They want their money's worth. And actually, this reminds me, we should talk about Banana Boys in a minute. But the audience wants their money's worth. And so I want it big. Like, let's really do it. So we had an elevator in the set, and we had a 2-story, big, huge barn, and Johnny's space that became many different spaces. And I mean, as a set, it looked great on the stage, and it was really, really worked well for the piece. It didn't take away from it, but it added a lot of dimension that to it. We had a big there was the big conceit of that is there's a grand piano in the center of the stage, and everybody thinks it looks like a tractor at the beginning, right? Because you think, dear Johnny dear, it's going to be about a tractor, and then of course they pull all the stuff away and it's a grand piano, and we go on from there. But it was really interesting. Just about dress rehearsal, first dress, I sat there and I remembered I had sent Eric when we did the remount a picture of a storm coming over the prairies. And I said, somehow I think this is the show for me, just the prairies and a storm. And then we kind of got caught up in, well, it's got to be a big show, and all this kind of stuff. But if I had that show to do again, it would be the prairies with maybe, a car buried in the sod, and maybe some farm equipment and stuff around, part of a house, and a big sky. That's how I think I'd really do that show. And so maybe I'll get a chance to do it again. I don't know. But just to go back to Banana Boys, when you were talking about it, it reminded me, because I've been teaching a lot. And my students, when I first started teaching here at the University of Guelph, in one of our classes, we take them to see plays. So we'd gone to the Shaw Festival to see a play. And the students, I was so surprised, because we go on these horrible old yellow school buses, right? Yeah. And they'd all shown up in their finest, right? All the girls had tons of makeup on, and some had sparkles on their clothes. And I thought, okay, these kids are used to going to Shaw and Stratford with their parents, right? And they got there, they went to the bar like old hands, they knew what they were doing, and they saw the show. And it was a Ken MacDonald design, this big sort of spinning pink seashell. Oh, yeah, right. I think it was You Never Can Tell was the play. Right. And the students, that was so cool. I really, really, really liked all this. And then we went to see Banana Boys. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it was, I think, the second production. It was in the backspace at Factory. Mm-hmm. And this is pre-renovation Factory. And it was a big, long, black room. Yeah. And they went in, and there was nothing on stage. There was just a stage and us in the audience. Mm-hmm. And we were the audience that night, except maybe poor people who weren't. And Nina, because she's a graduate of Guelph, Nina Aquino, who directed the show, she had the actors they come on stage and they have some beer on the front of the stage, and they're talking about the hot chicks at Guelph and all this kind of stuff. And then the setting was basically this kind of a stretcher, mobile stretcher on wheels, and this window unit that revolved. And the students were blown away by it, because they had never seen a show where one thing became several things. Right. They had never seen that kind of level of magic where everything wasn't solved for them. This is another design philosophy, right? Yeah. Give them a hint. Don't give it all to them. Right. And they just, oh my gosh, that's the best play I've ever seen in my life. That was awesome. But they'd also never seen anything like my Blythe experience that was about them. Yeah. And it was so important. I was so happy that I had brought them to see that. Yeah. And it gets back to that idea of design. Don't show them too much. Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful film. It's about Alice Liddell. Mm-hmm. And it was done actually with the Henson's Creature Workshop. It's about her touring North America, talking about Charles Dodson and what it was like to know Lewis Carroll. Right. And I forget the name of the piece, but it's about her life. And through her life, she's in an apartment hotel, I think, somewhere in New York. And she goes out on the balcony, and the Mad Hatter's Tea Party is happening. And all these sort of fanciful things happen as the show goes on. But she's a very proper, aristocratic, quite aristocratic Victorian woman. Mm-hmm. And they ask her, and they say, well, Miss Little, what advice would you give to young people for reading? And she says, well, they must sit in a proper chair, one that is good for their spine and keeps them proper posture, and they must have a reading lamp that helps them, doesn't strain their eyes, so they can see the page very clearly, but not so clearly that there aren't shadows in the room. Right. And I thought, oh, yeah. This is theater. This is design. Mm-hmm. So you've got to have shadows. Yeah. You've got to have that space for imagination, where the audience can take little bits, and then they can participate. Don't give it to them all. Yeah.
I've used this quote, I think, earlier on in the episodes for the title block, but it struck me. I was reading a Robert Edmund Jones.
Dramatic imagination.
Yeah, maybe dramatic imagination, and he insisted that a set must look incomplete without an actor on it. So you have to give people space.
Yeah.
to imagine, space for the actor to imagine, space for the audience to imagine. It's very important.
And a sense of he says a sense of occasion, I think.
Right.
But expectant. Something's going to happen, right? You choose a few things on the stage, and then what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's terrific. Okay, so you found your way to Guelph.
Yes.
How did that happen? Well, first of all, when did it happen, and then how did you find your way here?
Really, it was by chance again. It's nuts. It's all chance. Boys and girls, you just throw it out there to the universe. And I was very tired of doing film, 14-hour days. I was getting older, and I was looking to teach. And I happened to be on a train going to Montreal with another designer I knew. And I said, I'd really like to teach again. I think I've got something to offer, and really it's about time us old farts rolled over and gave some space for the younger designers to do their work. And he said, Guelph's looking for somebody. And I thought, Guelph, the University of Guelph. Yeah, I know they have a theatre department because I'd had a fellow named Alan Watts who'd assisted me at Stratford. And I'd been there to see a couple of shows, and I thought, that's so perfect. It's not Toronto, but it's close to Toronto, so I can keep all my friends. Maybe I can even still live in Toronto. And I could go there. Well, it doesn't hurt to apply. And lo and behold, I applied and I was shortlisted. And then I came for an interview. I thought, I haven't got it. I'm sure I haven't got it. I didn't think it had gone particularly well. And they called me and offered me the job. And it's been great. It's a wonderful hidden little gem here, the University of Guelph. Nobody really knows about it. We keep putting signs up. Here we are at MUU. We do have a theatre department. I don't know if you saw the big banner outside, theatre at Guelph. I've created this sort of performing arts wing with production photos and that, and just and it's very vibrant, lively. It's a BA, so it's not a BFA, and it's a more well-rounded program. When I taught at Concordia, it was very much a conservatory type. Students come in with a portfolio. You have to be screened to get in. Every year we had portfolio reviews. Some people were dropped from the program. Very intense. Here it took me a bit of adjusting because I'm used to being in a fine arts faculty, and I'm used to saying, okay, let's get your paints out. Let's start working. Here it was, my first day I was lecturing on theatre. Lecturing, I never lectured in my life. Oh my gosh. I found out soon enough, though, the students hate lectures anyway, so it's better just not to lecture and to talk to them and let them do some of the work. But here, the students do all kinds of things. It's a program, the students who have graduated, who I've kind of polled, have told me that what they like most about this program is they get to do everything. So you can star in a show. The next show you're the stage manager. The next show you're building the set. It has a strong academic side to it as well. So there's theory courses. A lot of students have gone on to do their MA and their PhD. We've got a couple of students at National Theatre School now who went on to become in acting. One's in the playwriting program. But definitely after a BA, you have to do something else as well. Although several students have gone on and after their BA and formed their own theatre companies. Because one of the things they do teach here is it's a small program, and it's how to create your own theatre, how to get out there and be able to do everything. So they've done it, and then a lot of them go on for further training, as I think a lot of students do now. We were lucky enough. I did a BFA. I did an MFA, or tried to do an MFA at Minnesota, but I didn't finish it. And I was lucky enough to live in a time when there was lots of work. Work's a lot harder to get now. So being an entrepreneur, being someone who can create your own theatre company is really important, I think, for graduate students to learn. And we've just put in a new curriculum where we're helping them a lot with that, I'm hoping. We've got a whole fourth-year course called Theatre Culture and Organization, like how do you actually get a job? How do you write a grant? Sure. But also we have a course in second year, like just devised theatre, creating devised theatre, and then their fourth year capstone course is devised piece. Sometimes it's written one acts. It's like a play festival. It's their own little sort of mini fringe festival that they do. So, training them that way with those sort of skills.
When you look back, we touched a bit on the LIP grants and the real possibilities of just doing whatever you could or whatever you wanted to back in the 70s. When you compare that time to this time, I know it's hard to say one is better or one is worse, but do you feel like there are too many challenges now? Do you feel like it's creating better artists? Do you feel like like how when you compare the two environments, which one would you rather live in?
Now, that's a tricky question. Certainly, I'd still rather go back, I think, because there was so much opportunity. And I think in either environment, the cream rises to the top. The hard part about now is rents in the bigger cities are so expensive. So some of my students, they've stayed in Guelph and are doing their own. We've now got a Guelph Fringe Festival that's starting. Another company, little company that they've formed called People House. And because they just can't make it in a city where there's that much competition and your rent is exorbitant. That's the difference, is we didn't have to, well, we didn't earn that much money, but then we didn't have to pay that much either. So I honestly think it's tougher, even though there's more opportunity. But that said, people find the work. I think the work is better. I think it's way better now than it was. I think theater's alive and well and thriving in Toronto. But the number of good shows, I think there's a lot more than there were before. We spent a lot of time doing pretty bad stuff. I hate to say it. I was there, but we did.
I always found that there's a philosophy. When I was first working in the new buddy space, they were trying to they were trying to squeeze every last minute out of the theater in the first few years they were there. It was a new space. It was built for them. It was
use it,
really interesting. Yeah, like don't do it as non-traditional as you want. Use the balcony, use the trap, everything else. And they also jam-packed, because they had the opportunity with their own space that was big and could accommodate a broad range of shows. They also jam-packed a lot of shows in there. And so there were one or two really quite great pieces, maybe three, and then 4 or 5, substantial, and then the bottom third were really. Did you really want to spend $25,000 on that? And I always thought wouldn't it be great if you would just program 5 shows and do the 5 best ones you could find? But then you miss out on the experiments.
Yeah, right? It's true, and you miss all that crazy stuff that just might turn into something, And it was funny, we just did a devised piece for our main stage, and the students were terrified. I forgot how conservative, I don't know, the people seemed to be at this time. And they just didn't. They said, but we don't have a script. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're doing. And thank God it was a success. Thank God it worked out. They all got like, oh my gosh, I learned so much from that. But I said to them, and it could have been terrible too. It could have been a disaster, but you have to. It's the nature of any art. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Even with the shows that were disasters of mine, you learn from it. And maybe they were just disasters at the wrong time. Maybe it was just a show at the wrong time. Yeah. Maybe a few years later, it would have worked out. Yeah. People would have taken it differently.
It strikes me that in the world of visual art, unless you're doing large installations, public art or something that takes a lot of people to produce, like a film piece or a video installation. If you have a grant or if you have some sort of seed money to put together a piece of visual art, if it doesn't work out, nobody has to see it.
That's true.
You can just sort of put it away in a drawer and go, I'm not going to see that, and then start again.
Yeah.
Or do 3 different iterations and go, I'm almost there. And the 5th and 6th one, and maybe by the time you get down to your 12th or 15th painting or 15th sculpture or whatever the media is, you feel like you're really going at a good clip. In theater, going back to fix stuff is almost impossible because it takes such a big machine to do the first bit. And I'm not talking about necessarily one-person shows or... fringe shows tend to be that risk, but even putting a fringe show together requires a stage manager and somebody to look for the props and the set and paying in weeks of rehearsal, and it's kind of a big deal. And then once it could flop, you may not have the opportunity to come back or resources to come back and fix it. Do you think that we need? And the reason it strikes me is that I feel like we need a machine that is maybe a bit more robust so people can take those risks rather than focusing on the successful companies all the time.
Well, I think theaters companies still there are theater companies like Gargantua, Volcano, companies like that do take those risks, and they actually structure it so you can do something like Gargantua for sure. They do cycles, right? So you come and see a cycle and you give feedback, and then you do it again. And I think a lot of the bigger theater companies have got to find a way to do that again, to have the risk stuff. Because remember when Stratford was going to do that? The third stage at Stratford, which then became the Tom Patterson, for a while was doing exactly that. And then they had to put bums in seats and it all became too big a deal. So then it got more structured. More controlled. Then the studio was going to be like that. The studio, to some degree, yes, but it's hard at Stratford. The level of I don't know, money is time and paranoia, I think, that goes into any big theater company makes it really hard to do really good creative work. You really have to rise above that, and you have to have visionaries who create theater companies where all the artists in it feel comfortable, can feel like they can be stupid and do dumb stuff, and don't always second guess themselves. And maybe were it ever thus in theater, maybe that's part of the cycle. Things you get the young people doing that stuff, not necessarily young, but older people too, people who want to take risks, who work together and earn little money and do it for the love, and then it becomes more established, and then the next wave comes in. But I think all of us, especially those of us who have kind of opted, like I have, I guess, to work in the more established theaters, sort of all have soft spots for the old days when, we were just sort of putting stuff together ourselves. I like working in more established theaters mostly because I don't like building my own sets and costumes. I'd rather work with the actors and the directors and have the ideas. But, I wish it was easier somehow.
And one last question just on that general topic. Something I'm really interested in is site-specific work and things that are not traditional theater, because traditional theater, there seems to be a requirement that traditional theater competes somehow with Netflix and film and other kind of arts events, instead of offering its own unique qualities and focusing on those. For example, musical theater. It's hard to replicate musical theater in any other medium except for live performance. The film, and we've had a bunch of live TV events of musical theater, which in their own respect have been successes. But really, seeing Grease on television, there's a certain, circus act of doing a live performance. But honestly, when you go to see it in the live theater, it's a completely different experience. So we should be focusing on that instead of trying to replicate film. What about site-specific things that are like along the line of verbatim theater, where you're telling real people, stories of real people in their own words, in the same way that you're telling a story about a space in that space at that point in time? Like, do the students here have an opportunity to create that type of theater? Do you talk about it? Is it something that's on the radar, or is it something that's still not so non-traditional that it hasn't quite made it into training?
Site-specific work was very much a part of here, because I taught with Gerard Smith, whose whole life has been site-specific theater, largely working with R. Murray Schafer. He and his wife Diana, who does the costume design, they've done opera in the forest, opera in the woods for a long time. And so very much a part of the program here was that kind of site-specific stuff. We even did a show a few years ago with landscape architecture in the Arboretum. With students, landscape architecture students and theater students came together to create a piece. We've lost some of that since Gerard left, and just sort of the energy, because it takes a great deal of energy to do. For me personally, in my career, I want to do site-specific stuff, but not theater. I actually just want to do site-specific art. Right. So I guess because after a while, I've gotten tired of having to get along with everybody else. Should I say that? Is that heresy? No. You spend years, theater is a collaborative art form, and I really adore the people I've worked with. But boy, it's nice to do your own work too, because you only answer to yourself. And it's your ideas, and nobody says, well, yeah, but maybe it should be red. Or could you make it bigger? Well, no, I'm not going to, because I don't want to. Exactly. But site-specific is still very exciting. And we need another Murray Schafer to come along, start doing more of that kind of work.
Yeah, I agree. I think those kind of events are extraordinary. I worked on. We were speaking about this earlier about the new magazine called Scene,
Yes.
a new trade journal called Scene, talking about Hermes Trismegistos at the Union Station, and things like that. I think events like that are unique, or they are singular experiences that the audience can explore, and even if it's not completely successful, it's still something you'll never forget.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and it's telling stories that are important. As long as you're telling stories that are important to people, I think you can touch them. Right?
Yeah, well, and Gerard took a group of students. He had money from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, SHIRC for short, and he went out onto Murray Schafer's property, actually, I think it was part of his property, and built this site-specific theatrical event that only had 4 performances. And now it's just kind of rotting away. I keep thinking, what's going to happen in 10 years? We should have like a reunion or a revival or 100 years when archaeologists come by, right, and find this. Yeah. These artifacts lying there. Because I've always wanted to do a piece, actually, of masks and things that would just kind of dissolved into the ground, that you just, like, part of the site-specific quality of it was the destruction of the mask. Yeah, exactly. And just sort of leave it there.
That's interesting. I remember that just on a off, not non sequitur, but on that note, I remember the second year of Nuit Blanche, there was an event. There was an installation in what was the old pop shop on Queen Street, and it was I think it turned into a car wash or detailing place. Anyways, it had a car bay and a large drain, and they had placed. It was a few years after the teenager got picked up and dropped off at the outskirts of Regina or Saskatoon and froze to death. Then the First Nations boy.
Happens all the time.
And terrible tragedy. And this installation was a series of ice blocks that was probably the size of a beer or a sarcophagus or something like that. It was that kind of size, and they were just slowly melting into the drain, and into each block was carved a letter, and it spelt out Stone Child, which was the name of that boy, and it was the impermanence of it that was melting away, and as soon as it would disappear, it'd be a wet stain on the floor, and then you would never see it again. And it spoke so perfectly to things like that. And those kind of events, I mean, it has a theatricality. It's got it's occurring in time. It's not a static sculpture.
That's what really excites me. To me, that's so fabulous, and it's very theatrical. It sometimes could be combined with performance. So that's certainly the direction I'm going. Yeah.
I'm excited by that. All right, so let's now. Have you had a chance to shape the program to your own? You've been here for how many years now?
This will be my 10th year.
Okay, so you've had some time to sort of turn the program into what you think it should be.
Well, yes and no. Yeah. I think that what's happened here is, since we've lost Gerard, Gerard retired, nothing happened to him. Sure. He's very happy. He's very happy. That's good. Doing site-specific stuff and all kinds of music out in Perth, near Perth, Ontario. Yeah. But Gerard is retired. We were trying to build a design school. Right. Something that was different. We were also, he was trying to organize a site-specific conference. Here of people who do site-specific theater. The university had gone through huge cutbacks. I know a lot of universities have, and a lot of university programs. And one of the issues here is, under the old administration we really had to fight for credibility, the whole College of Arts, because it was turning into very much a science university, as it is, the University of Guelph, MUU, science and agriculture. And so we have spent the last few years just dealing with survival. We're now surviving, which is great. We're about to hire a new teacher here, which is really exciting news. And it's an investment the university has made into our existence, and we've come up with a new curriculum. Yeah. And the curriculum is very much, rather than a traditional undergraduate curriculum where it's you teach a course in design, you teach a course in acting, a course in technical theater, or whatever. All of these courses now are sort of problem-solving based. So you teach a course, but the thing is, okay, we want to create a piece of theater from the 18th century. So you study all aspects of that, and then it has an outcome. Right. Maybe it's just scenes from it, but maybe you also incorporate 18th century costuming or clothing. and manners, that kind of thing. So each course is centered around the professor and what they want to teach, and they integrate in different ways so that it's a little hard to discuss in quickly. But you, for example, your introduction to technical theater, rather than just teaching people about the machines and the lights and that, you show them how they integrate with the performance. So how does that lighting actually work for that performance? Why are you focusing that light like that? So that it's much more of a holistic approach to each class, and it's instructor-centered rather than subject-centered. So if I'm teaching the course, I would probably teach a course on directors and designers and how they work together, or something on the dramaturgy of design, so that they learn about it in a kind of a different way. So
Sounds like a great direction. That's awesome.
I hope so. It's people are excited about it here, and it makes us kind of unique. So we'll see. Catch me in 4 years.
Yes, indeed. Oh,
See if it's working.
I'll be glad to come back.
Yeah.
Here at the University of Guelph, you've got the L.W. Connolly Archive, which is a theater archive that collects theater history. Tell me about your commitment to theater history and keeping those records and saving those artifacts.
It's really important, yeah. We have, I believe it's the largest archive in Canada. Not sure about North America, but it's become the place where people come and bring their stuff. And it's wonderful to go through and show the students. It's interesting because we do tours of the archives, and Catherine Harvey, who is the head archivist, she does good things, like she'll bring out show reports and things. So who thinks save a show report, right, from a show? But it's archival material, and you never know what happened that night. Someone went screaming out of the theater at a certain time, or there were bats flying through the theater or whatever. So, but there's a substantial design archive, and it's, in a way, it's kind of falling apart because people put set models there and they stay there, and they fall apart. And for a while, they had money. They got a grant, so they were photographing them. So you can actually go online and look at a lot of set models. They did a 360 of them, which I thought only an archivist would do 360, because who wants to look at the back of a model, of a set model? But you can look at it, and all the tape and the funny little notes and bits and pieces that are there. But I decided when I got the job at Guelph that one of the things I had always wanted to do was to promote theater design more in Canada. Just like you're doing with these podcasts, thank you very much, that there's so little written about it. So I went to them, and with my friend Sean Bria, who's a former theater designer but does mostly film design now, all film design, we had talked about who in the archive we might want to feature. And at the time, he was very good friends with Cameron Porteous, who's designed many, many, many shows at the Shaw Festival and elsewhere, and had assisted him. And Cameron's archive was one of the largest archives that was here. So we got in touch with Cameron and said, would you like to do this? And he said, well, of course, why not? So we got grants. We partnered with Theatre Museum Canada, and had about $60,000 ultimately in grants to do a touring exhibition of Cameron's work. So out of that, we got, the Shaw Festival also helped us. It gave us a lot of help, hired 2 assistants who came in, Camelia Koo and Taylor Sainsbury, who came in and did the model refurbishing. So they put all the models together and got them into mint condition. They're fabulous looking. Shaw Festival built touring cases for us, and then we just opened it at a little museum in Niagara-on-the-Lake in conjunction with the Shaw Festival. Then we took it to the Design Exchange in Toronto, who went crazy for it. They said, we've got to have more of this. Bring us more theater design. We love this. Yeah. And then we did it at the Art Gallery here in Guelph as well. And as part of that, we did a catalog. And the catalog went to a lot of places. There's not many. I think there's a lot more places the catalog could be going. I know it went to China with Sean Kerwin when she went. I know it went to the last Prague Quadriennale, because after we had done this, we were contacted by the ADC, who said, can we take parts of this to Prague for the exposition there? So they did. So they took that, and they took the catalogs, and I think they pretty much sold out of the catalogs there, which was great. But now, if anybody wants another one, Michael Wallace, the Theatre Museum of Canada, has a bunch more. And it's a good catalog, because it's not just pictures, but it's design philosophy and how Cameron approaches design and how he grew up and why he became a designer, all that kind of stuff. I'll give you a copy you can take away.
Sure, that'd be
you know.
great.
So that was really important. And since then, I've been a little busy, but the next step is to do Susan Benson, who, along with Michael Whitfield, her husband, who's a lighting designer, who've had such huge influence on so many of us as designers. I think of Cameron, Susan, and Michael as being kind of the grandparents of our generations, who mentored so many people, and even if people didn't work with them, have been so influenced by them. So I really would have loved to have done Susan and Michael together. But it's a big project. So my next project is to do Susan, at least a book of her work. We started working on it several years ago, and at the time we were going to do a book on her approach to design, but we realized we had two books. One is sort of Susan's approach to theater and her theater work, and then the other is a book on how to be a designer. Right. So the book on how to be a designer went away. Yeah. It's still there in my computer. But now it's her work, interviews with different people, how she approaches different, like I have case studies of how she worked with different directors on shows. Some of them, sadly, who died before I was able to interview them. I did interview Brian McDonald, which was great, and I have all that transcript and that written out, but I didn't get to Robin Phillips in time, unfortunately. But I have a lot of her memories and recollections of sort of important shows in her history. And how she grew up and how she thinks designers should work and how she was trained. So that's going to be put into a book and maybe a little mini exhibition. I'm not going to be as grand this time because it's a huge job and it's really expensive, but at least get that out there.
It strikes me that we just lost Francois Barbeau
yes.
a month, 2 months ago, right? Yeah. And I actually have a line in my future show notes about designers I want to interview, and Francois Barbeau
was one of them.
And we lost him. So I think it's really important to get this kind of information recorded. Yeah, because there's not enough resources out there, and theater is such an ephemeral thing that you have to grab a hold of what is there that you can while you can, because it disappears so easily. And what about designers out there? For example, I have my you never throw anything out. I went through and winnowed through all of my old shows and put them into folders and everything, and I got rid of things that were duplicated, like scripts, for example, that were not written in. But if there are people out there who are keeping their own archives, is the archive here looking for that material, or is it overwhelming to bring it down here? Like what do they want? What are they looking for, and what do they want? What do they not want?
Well, I'd say contact them. I know John Dinning has a substantial collection of his stuff that he's been trying to get to them, and I actually have to get in touch and find out what's happening there, because a lot of it is the issue of shipping. I know that they're pretty overwhelmed with set models, which is really too bad, because I'd love to keep them. One of the plans, though, for the new renovation in the archive in the library, because it's housed in the library, is to have a wall of set models. So it was going to be like a clear wall that you can see that. So I hope that's still going through, because Catherine really loves theater. This is Catherine Harvey again, and really wants to preserve it. But when Tyler and Cami Coog fixed all these models up, you don't get people of their talent and their ability to fix them as well, right? Yeah. And people have to be paid, but that's what you need, is that kind of refurbishing all the time.
Yeah, they have those. They're, what do they call them in a museum? They're preservation. It's preservationists, or they're
I don't know what it's called, something like that. But yes, like, that, like the Victorian and Albert Museum.
Yeah, exactly.
They have a whole department that does that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the issue. You go and look at working drawings now. So many people have given their working drawings over. They're faded. You can't see them. The tracing paper's falling apart. Yeah. So much now is done on computer, and then some stuff's on floppy disks. Well, and it's tricky. It's very tricky.
Yeah, I have a 3.5-inch drive at home that I had to pull some stuff off again for Kevin Lamott, because we did a remount of the Place the Thing. Do you know about Beverly Emmons and the New York Public Library's Lighting Design Archive?
I have heard about this. Yes,
it's available online, and they've got Gene Rosenthal, Theron Musser, and one other designer. Maybe Tom Skelton. They've got 3 of their designs in.
No, Gil Wexler. You have to have Gil Wexler. Anyway,
Well, I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have them in the archive, but I don't think they've got. They don't have it digitized because again, it's a lot of work to digitize and put them in context and.
Yeah.
But it's a wonderful resource of people out there who are looking for that. There's actually a companion podcast called In One that Corey Paddock, not a companion podcast, he's doing the same thing I'm doing with Broadway designers down in New York.
Great.
And he interviewed
Good.
Beverly about this project. It's a really exciting project.
Actually, I have to interrupt too because the British theatre designers are doing a lot as well.
terrific.
I have 3 books of their catalogs of exhibitions they've done, but also there's a section of the Victoria and Albert Museum now that is dedicated to theatre design.
What a great idea.
Yeah, so it's great to go and see.
Yeah. That's terrific. Okay, so that's theater history done.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of. I was lamenting this earlier that things like CTR don't focus on a lot of design work. There's for example, you've been working in the field for 40 years. I did a search in CTR, and I think you were mentioned once.
Yes, and part of that I think is just, theater, CTR, a lot of it comes out of Guelph, right? You know, it's like editors, doing a lot of people have edited CTR from here. Yeah. Why don't I just step up and say, we should do some more articles? It's energy, I guess. It should happen. It really should happen. And maybe when we do when do Susan Benson, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. We certainly want to do the book online. If we can. There's a lot of clearances and issues there, though, of course, because you're dealing with photos of actors and that kind of thing, and photographers and getting clearance from all those people for an online book. But CTR, there should be much, much more.
It's encouraging to see a journal like Scene,
Yes.
which we were just slumming to downstairs. It wasn't the first issue either. It looks like it was like a number in a volume.
I know, and both of us went, why don't we have this?
I've never seen that before. Why haven't we?
Yeah.
It looks incredible. So I would encourage people to go to that. I'll find out in the show. It'll be in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Great. So just finishing up. The focus of this podcast is really, or the audience for this podcast really are people at the beginning of their career, people who are training in theater or thinking of training in theater, and certainly interested professionals and high-level amateurs. But when you talk to people who are trying to make a decision to go into theater professionally, whether it's acting. That's late in the day. Whether it's acting, acting or design, performance designing, directing, whatever those things. Do you think? I mean, you're training the next generation. I can only assume that you think it's a good idea for people to go into theater. But what do people have to know before they make that decision? What do they have to prepare themselves for when they go into a profession like theater? And do you think it can be? Do you think it's an easy decision to make, or do you think that people have to be wary?
Well, I think they need to be wary. It's not something you're going to earn a lot of money at first, but we all did it. We all made it. Now I'm teaching, and that's part of it. I did have to do that to actually earn some kind of a living. Until I got that job at Concordia, I really wasn't making, I was doing okay. But you had to do so many shows a year to actually make it work, and this so much of what we still deal with at the Associated Designers of Canada is making fees commensurate with the amount of work you have to do and the fact that you can only do 6 or 7 shows a year unless you're a lighting designer without killing yourself. Or a sound designer can probably do the same. They can do more. I said that to my students the other day. You might want to become a lighting designer because they can do more shows. They fly in later. Right. But especially costume designers, they really get the worst of that. So, yes, I'd say to them, if it turns you on, if it excites you, do it. I would also say try to be multidisciplinary if you can. It doesn't hurt. One of the great things for me is that I was able to do television as well and film, and they're still very separate worlds. They're not for actors, but for some reason they seem to be for designers, that you seem to go into one or the other. I know Deborah Hansen's managed to bridge. She's doing more costume design, I think, for television and film, and does more set and costume design for theater. So there are people out there who are managing to do it. And keep teaching in your back pocket. It doesn't hurt. Getting those degrees can work very much in your future, because if I didn't have my degree, I had a BFA and almost an MFA, if I hadn't been such a, I don't know, hard head. If I just stayed another year, But I was, 24. I didn't care. I wanted to do exciting work. And I was lucky enough that it didn't affect me ultimately, because I had a school that wanted to hire me for my professional experience. Not all schools will do that. But I think the really good schools do. But I also understand that if you've got an MA and a PhD program, you have to have people who can teach at that level. But anyway, but I don't know if that's good advice. Just make yourself happy. I've had so many students whose parents made them go into sociology or biochem or whatever because they couldn't see them having a theater degree. But they're taking theater courses, and half of them have changed their major, and really you do where your passion is. If you're not enjoying it, if you're not loving it, then go do something else, because it's hard and it's very competitive, but most things in the world are, which isn't very encouraging if you're young, right? Everybody tells you, oh, it's going to be really hard. I walked 20 miles in the snow, but it's ultimately really rewarding. It really is. Theater it teaches you so much about just how to live, how to be a person, how to work under extreme pressure, how to work with other people, how to follow your own instincts. Those are things you don't learn in other places. So studying theater teaches you that. This is my spiel for parents, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I look forward to the future. Your future projects here. You have to keep me in the loop.
I'll send you pictures of my site-specific stuff.
That'd be awesome.
No, I've said it. I have to do it.
Yes, exactly. It's on the record.
Yeah, okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
Michael.
Thank you so much.
That was designer Pat Flood speaking to me in May 2016. Next time, another Bellows podcast about leaving the business, very prescient. And then designer Bretta Garricky meets me in Stratford to discuss this Alberta-born designer's fascinating career. The music for this podcast is by Vern Good, with voiceover by Gabriel Cropley. Please go to iTunes and give us a review. It'll help get the word out about this podcast and share the history of theatre design in Canada. And you can follow us on Twitter @thetitleBlockCA and on Facebook.com/The Titleblock Podcast. You can send comments and requests by email to thetitleBlock@gmail.com. Don't forget that if you like the show, please support us on Patreon.com. Feel free to share this with your friends, colleagues, students, and teachers, or listen to it while you decide what to do with the hundreds of set models piling up in your basement. I'm Michael Cruz, and I'll see you next time on The Title Block.